guest is Steve McBride, Vice President of Operations at Spokane, Washington-based Skils'Pay, Skils'kin, and A&W Window Cleaning. Now, clearly, he's a very busy man. I'm excited to speak with Steve today because he's one of those special leaders who's passionate about more than just business. For him, giving back is real. He's deeply invested in his community and passionate about giving everyone the opportunity to contribute. This mission has focused his business and philanthropic interests into affordable housing, demonstrating to businesses the value and loyalty of disabled employees, ensuring clean drinking water, helping aging parents to maintain their independence, and making sure that our military men and women can maintain and improve their credit ratings while deployed. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So let's start with go back a little bit. Clearly, you're someone who is deeply invested in your community. I grew up on the opposite coast from you. I'm an East Coast girl, and I did have the opportunity to live on the West Coast for a year while I was in corporate America and really, really loved the vibe there. So tell me, what was it like growing up, and what do you love the most about Spokane?
Well, I love Spokane. We'll just start there. I'm a fourth generation Spokane, so it's hard for me not to. I think it's like in my DNA at this point. The West Coast is, where I've spent all of my adult life, mostly here in Spokane and then also in Seattle, Washington. And growing up in Spokane, it was great. It's a nice 4-season part of the Northwest. So, being able to enjoy and appreciate like all of those seasons, I've carried that through to my adulthood. And I watched the town go from, a small regional hub to now kind of like a medium town that's definitely on the map. When I fly to different places and I'm at different conferences and I say where I'm from and expect everyone to say, "Oh, you're at Seattle, right?" People are starting to say Spokane. Yes, and so that's it's interesting to be on the map and just a great place to live.
That's great. And how many people are in Spokane now?
I think the greater Spokane area is just under 600,000 people.
Okay, so it's a little bit smaller. I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, and we had, I think by the time I left, we had about 900,000, but we incorporated some other areas in order to make that happen. So it's a nice sized town because you know people. It's not like everybody's watching you all the time, but pretty much when you go out, you're probably running into people that you know.
Yeah, it sounds like you might be my neighbor because yes, I call it the big little town. Because you still run into everybody, and it's a gift and a curse. And a curse, right? You really want to run into everyone. So, how has your career evolved to one that seems truly focused on not only growing healthy businesses, but on making a positive impact in your community? Start wherever you'd like to start. Sure. Well, it's definitely been a journey. Getting to this space of working in the nonprofit world, and sure happy I've gotten here. I started my professional career really in sales, everything from selling LASIK eye surgery to medical devices, everything from ventilators to little plastic things that are going to keep your blood clean. Just a wide range of products. And, I like selling, I like people. And that's what I thought was, my passion. And as, my life evolved, as my career evolved, I just kept looking for something else. I started a business that did at-home sleep studies, and I'm like, okay, get to change the world here. That didn't quite work. It's just something was missing. And I was at a party and met the CEO of this organization. It just so happens to be called Skils'kin, and started talking about, what the world of nonprofits look like. And in my mind, I was like, okay, you're giving back. It's like stuffing bags of food at a food bank. That was my experience. And he started to describe to me something different. And it sounded a lot like the business that I loved, but with a mission.
And that's, I think, where I was really hooked. And so over the course of a few more conversations, he painted a picture for me of what it could look like to work at a company like Skils'kin. And I finally said yes. And I just can't believe the joy that's in my life, working for a mission-driven organization. It filled a void I didn't know I had. And
so, I mean, we spend so many hours of our life working, and to be able to know that you're doing something that is impactful as well as just bringing home a paycheck, that's huge. And that's what so many people, I think, are looking for today.
well, I know I couldn't even put words to it though. I just thought maybe I had needed a better boat, but that wasn't, no happiness came from there, because, you know, I did get a better boat, but it was empty. But when it was about service, that really opened up some doors. And I ended up, you know, starting to volunteer more too, and getting involved in other aspects of, you know, Spokane, my community, and where I could, you know, use my talents to give back.
Now, Skils'kin, as I recall, has an interesting backstory. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Yeah, well, it is. We're 51 years old now, so we've been around for a long time. And it all started with a group of parents who had children that were living with disabilities, and they were through school. It was time to, you know, go to work, and there was no place to go. So they came together, they pooled their resources, and came up with an idea of, you know, job training for people living with a disability based here in Spokane. And it kind of grew from there.
So, I mean, it's really interesting. It's a lot of people, I think, start businesses because they have a personal need. And it sounds like, you know, but a lot of them never really make it past the solving their own personal need and keeping it really tiny. It's really impressive that Skils'kin as an organization has started by fulfilling a need, but obviously that was a need that was out there in the community by so many people that it resonated and has really grown impressively since then.
Definitely, right? Yeah. That moment that this thing was created, it really did solve a problem for their immediate families, but there was a bigger community out there, right? This is early 1970s. Institutionalization of people with disabilities was the thing. And now we're trying to figure out, like, no, people have a lot more opportunity, or if they have more opportunity, you know, to work, be engaged, they can just be productive in their community. And that's where we've taken that mission and continue to drive that conversation.
So I mean, in your experience, how should employers think differently about hiring people with disabilities? And, you know, I think of right now, we're in the middle of this wave of the Great Resignation. And I don't think I can go to a networking event or talk to a business owner without them complaining about, oh, it's so hard to get good people and so hard to retain good people. And I'm so frustrated with managing people in HR. Is this potentially part of the solution for some businesses? And what have you learned that can make that work?
Yeah, I definitely think it's part of the solution. And in my mind, I go back to like the basics of, okay, what does a business need to do? Depending if they make a product, maybe it's a service, whatever they are there to do. Fundamentally, how do you build a workforce around it? I know when I was, you know, starting businesses, working for, you know, in the medical world, I try to find people that their skills matched what I needed to be done. And I think that basic moment, you can talk about employing people with disabilities too. Skills are wide and varied. And as long as you're matching those skills to the work that you need done, you can have some amazing outcomes and a great workforce. And people with disabilities play I think, a critical role in that part. Then there's all sorts of benefits of, you know, just a diverse workforce. And I call that the icing on the cake. That's something we're all talking about as employers. It's like, what does a diverse workforce do? What is it? What kind of ideas are generated? How can you, move mountains together? Here's a group of folks that have a lot to say, and it's I think a critical part of that workforce.
And could you maybe share some examples of the types of work that you've seen people, and obviously when I say people with disabilities, that's a very broad brush, that obviously disabilities have a quite a significant range. And I would think that probably the average employer is not as educated as they could be on what is available to them by having this level of diversity in their workforce. Could you maybe share some success stories or examples of some things that you've seen work, just to help get people thinking about how they can incorporate this diversity into their workforce?
Sure. In my experience, when I'm talking to business owners, it's pretty clear from the beginning, in the first 5 minutes of a conversation, people want to, be engaged in their community, do good in the world. It's a core trait that I think that many business owners have, and or managers. What helps maybe put a roadblock for when they're looking at hiring people living with a disability is just the fear of the unknown. Maybe they don't have a lot of experience, and like, oh, what am I going to have to do? And the reality is it's not that much. The accommodation process for some people can be very, very simple. I'll just talk about a couple people that work for us in some of our operations.
That'd be great.
We manufacture these soap dispensers that for a company out of California called Kier. Their whole mission is to get rid of single-use plastics in hotels. So these fancy dispensers, we put things together. One of our employees, he uses a wheelchair to get around. And so, a normal height table and putting things together is just a little too high for him. So what do? We've got a table that was a little lower. We put together kind of a lazy Susan type device, so he didn't have to, reach around and contort his body, and just kind of work right in front of him. Just something that simple changed everything. Oh, what else it did? It also increased our productivity for all employees, because all of a sudden people weren't moving around just because they could.
Oh, that
didn't
makes
mean
sense.
it was efficient, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you'll sit with, if someone is interested in incorporating people with disabilities into their workforce, that, maybe they don't know how to get started. Do they just have a conversation with you and say, hey, I'm interested, here's what I do, where do you think we might have a fit? And you figure it out from there?
Those are my favorite conversations, because you can usually, see light bulbs going off by the time you're ready to hang up. Because we're just describing someone with a physical disability, but people with intellectual disabilities have a ton to offer and fit various roles. And again, with sometimes just pretty reasonable accommodations. Like, what if maybe you need to write a list because someone just, their memory isn't long. It just doesn't, stick with them. So you just write a list, and each workday, here's the list. Here's the tasks I need to get done. We just check them off. Something is that simple can be the difference between successful employment, someone who's really a part of the team, and failure. So it's like, I think I'm
honestly, I think it all. So that's not that crazy of an accommodation.
Indeed, because the reality is we make accommodations for all of our employees. Everyone comes with a little bit of baggage or different, stuff that just needs to happen. So if I think people put that mindset when they're approaching a diverse workforce, they're going to be more successful.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And you mentioned a little bit earlier that you've also become involved in various other community projects and nonprofits in the community, and you're heavily involved in affordable housing as one of your mission-based projects. And I know that you've spent some time as president of the board of Spokane Housing Ventures, as well as being a current member of Catholic Housing Ventures. So clearly homelessness is a challenge in most urban communities. So tell me about some of the solutions that you've been working on in Spokane.
Sure. Well, let me just preface this. These are Steve McBride's opinions, not of the organizations that I.
That's okay. It's McBride.
All right. Well, as a community, and I think this is the same story everywhere. Everyone's trying to build themselves out of a problem. There's federal dollars coming in, just all sorts of houses happening, big apartments, buildings going up in urban core. That is happening across our country. Still a problem, right? It's not solving anything. We still have issues. So here, and what we get to be a part of, especially at Catholic Housing Ventures, is like a more holistic approach. Like, how do we deliver services to people, where they're at, meeting people where they're at. If they have been homeless for a long time, it's a different set of services than someone who's just recently become unhoused and experiencing homelessness. And I know for myself, that's the energy that I think, I want to put in, is kind of helping find people who are just recently experiencing homelessness. Maybe it's not chronic, but it might be the first few times before, they are on the street and camping. Can we help some of those people? Because this is my opinion. I think that effort there, we can really make a big impact in every single community, because prices are going up everywhere, right? And
absolutely.
Yes, it is hard to live. It's hard to, fill up your gas tank with minimum wage jobs. And if we can just help people at that moment, I think that'll make a big impact in the homelessness across our country.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people, when they encounter someone who is homeless, I think it perhaps, to some of us who are more fortunate, it's very easy to think, oh, well, that's so far from where I am. And that's just, that's somebody who failed. But there are so many people in many of our communities who are living paycheck to paycheck. And if you're in that situation and you're paying rent, it really only takes one downsizing from suddenly not being able to have a roof over your family. And it's not that, sadly, it's scarily, it's not that far off for a lot of people. So it is an issue that I think if we're in a position to be able to help, it is a really critical thing that we need to address in our communities.
Yeah, and there's services that, help people at that moment. But if you don't know about them until it's, a lot further down and you finally ask for help, it's a lot harder to come back from that. But if you are connected quickly, I believe that will help you, get on the track to being housed again a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of, the impact that has on you, if you look at being able to catch people at that point, I always think of the children as well, because, I look at, my daughter has now gone through and graduated high school, and she's heading off to college. And, from an early age, I saw just how dependent kids are on technology to be able to do well in school. Their assignments are online, they have to do their homework online. They have to, some of their reading materials are online. And I've been in some of the shelters here, and I've seen, like a large room where all the kids are supposed to do their homework after work, and there's 4 computers.
Right.
And so, and the disadvantage, it just sets up this domino effect of, so if I'm a kid, I could be super smart, right? And I don't have access to the technology. So now I'm, not able to do my homework. So my grades aren't as good. And, so that you see sort of maybe I'm not aware of, I get older, it's time for college. can't afford college, but I can't get time online, or I don't even have an awareness of how to find the resources that could maybe get me my college paid for. I don't even know what to look for. It's just such an effect on our communities that if we're not taking steps at that moment, we're hurting multiple generations of families.
Well said. Indeed, that snowball effect, the cumulative effect of just those little things that happen in your life, and all of a sudden you're helpless because you just don't know how to access things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can change that.
Well, so how? Tell me.
Well, maybe by educating, children about what kind of resources are there. I know there's a nonprofit here in Spokane. They're called Communities in Schools. We are finding people, children that you're describing. Maybe there's technological needs. Maybe it's just like they need a calculator and pencils and paper because, their parents can't provide that. Or it could be as something as like food insecurity. But this nonprofit exists to help those children meet some of those basic needs and then start to talk about what's possible in their life. And so talking about college, talking about what a FAFSA is, or, some of those things that maybe I might have taken for granted when I was growing up, but just to have some awareness about that can help change. And I think organizations that focus that energy specifically when people are growing up, that's how maybe we can impact that generational poverty that just we know it happens.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so, a lot of business owners are looking for ways to give back in their community, but they're not sure how. And in some cases, maybe they have money to donate, maybe they don't, and I mean, it's great to, nothing against kids' baseball teams. I mean, it's great if you want to sponsor a kids' baseball team, but to do something maybe in your portfolio of organizations that you support, finding those organizations in your own community that can really address, especially some of these kids, and giving them the opportunity. And maybe if you don't have the money to donate, I would think that even offering to speak to them perhaps and give them a perspective that they don't otherwise have. We're so influenced, we talk about nature versus nurture. Nurture is a big factor, and being able to see what could potentially be out there for you and, hear stories of people who made it. I think that could be really inspiring for a young person.
Absolutely. And on the flip side too, those business, folks, the people that are looked up to because their faces in the newspaper, they're in the Journal of Business, they might get a different perspective too. And I could go back to a simple thing. Maybe it's not money, maybe it's not time, maybe it's just opening up opportunities within your business itself, like giving someone a job that you might not have, in the past, just opening up that diversity of opportunity. I'm a big believer in employment and what the engagement that happens just by having a paycheck, that purpose, that
independence.
Yes. Yep. Community. Yeah. I see that, in our organization, the community aspect, people who might have been, living off Social Security, they're tight with their family, but outside of maybe the internet, they're just not connected. They come here to work, they're hearing other people's stories, they're making genuine friends. And even when they leave, I still hear stories now where, people are hanging out. They have a friend group. They have grown their connections. The opportunities that come from that, I guess, continue to pay off.
No wonder you love your job. Why? I know. I just started changing gears a little bit. A while back, I know that Skils'kin had a division that it's since spun off to focus on bill paying. And as I understand it, this is a business that is focused on helping whether it's aging parents or whether it's our military or even younger business travelers while they're traveling, or the military while they're deployed, to pay their bills on time, which is so important, as we know, to maintaining your credit rating. And we talk about another factor that can influence, what your opportunities are in life. Credit rating is very, very important in this country. So could you talk a little bit more about how that service works?
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the really exciting parts of our business right now. We've paid people's bills for decades. Mostly it was as a designated payee, which is, this corner of the world that helps people who can't pay their bills, and a lot of people with living with disabilities, and or maybe it's court mandated, but again, it's called designated payee. Did that for a long, long time. We learned how to pay bills well. We learned how to deliver great customer service, and realized not too long ago, just maybe a year and a half ago, that, hey, this translates to more people. More people could use our help. And we started this private pay side of our business called Skils'Pay. And we're really focusing, again, in the elderly environment, folks who want to age at home, but maybe their kids don't want to, pay their parents' bills. We can solve that. You described like consultants who are on the road and just gone. I mean, you did that for a while yourself.
That was life. I spent, 26 years in corporate America. A lot of that was traveling. And I tell you, when you're on a plane and in hotels and you're gone 4 or 5 days a week, and then you come home on the weekend, the last thing you want to look at is a pile of bills in your mail. And then if you forget something and you're off on another trip and then it's too late because it was due while you were gone, it's super annoying. So I would have absolutely loved to have found you back then.
Yes, and so now we have this solution. And again, with the military families, like if you're on deployment and you just need to focus on mission, then you don't want to focus on bills. We can be a solution for that too. So yeah, we're getting the word out across the country of what we're able to do. We have some pretty cool software that we built just for efficiencies on our part. When we were paying 1,000 people's bills a month, we had the ability to make that business really good, and we use technology to do it, and it's translating very well to this private model.
That's excellent. Well, and just another question that I wanted to ask you a little bit more generally is that, and just to give you some perspective, many of our listeners are either launching a new business, maybe they're acquiring a business, they're managing their own business, and clearly you've done all three very successfully. So could you share some of the lessons that you may have learned along the way? Maybe there were some things that if you had it to do over again, you would have done differently, or some things that you think worked really well? Because I always find that as an entrepreneur, it just feels like sometimes you have to make all the mistakes first. And it just is very frustrating. If you can find somebody who's maybe made some of the mistakes or has some lessons that they can share that can shortcut so you don't have to bump up against every single thing, that can be tremendously helpful. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Well, and I appreciate that compliment, and it sure didn't come from lack of heartache or some serious mistakes. And so there's a number of things that come to mind, but maybe I would leave your listeners with this. When you're in partnerships, make sure you have your own lawyers. That's a good lesson.
That's a great. Yeah. All the business attorneys out there listening going, yes, I've been telling you that.
And it seems so simple, right? But if you're in that moment of we're going to build something, we're going to, you're so focused on the customer service and the delivery of something innovative and a cool product, just don't miss some of those simple, things. I might also say, surrounding yourself with people who are not afraid to tell you the truth. So it's hard to hear as an owner, as a manager of people, or a leader of an organization, when you think you're right and someone says you're not. But as a leader, you need to hear that. And you get to decide, if it's true or not. But if everyone is, maybe they're afraid, or there's a culture where you don't get to have that kind of voice. In my experience, that's a recipe for failure. So find those, voices of dissent.
It's a lot cheaper to have somebody on your team tell you than to have the market tell you.
Indeed. And a lot less embarrassing too, right?
It is. I mean, yeah. And creating, as a leader, creating that environment where people feel like they can tell you the truth, that can be challenging sometimes. It's something that, sometimes people say, please, I want to hear the truth, but then for whatever reason, I don't know, their staff doesn't believe them, and that can be just as much of a problem. Are there any tips that you have there in terms of being able to create that open culture where people can come to you and really tell you when you're full of it?
I don't know if this is a tip, but at least it's how I approach things. Is words are one thing. We all have to, paint the North Star of where we're going and, where an organization's going. But people are looking at you at all times, whether it's, your body language, the actions, the decisions that you're making. And so in my opinion, when you're fostering a culture of openness and transparency, you just have to do that and be that all the time. And so maybe I think this is something that's valuable for people in their career, wherever you're at. Try to create a values-based business, because if you have core values that you live by, you can just make decisions that way as well. And the longer it goes and everyone sees, hey, this is how this business works, these are what we value, you start to attract people that also value the same thing. And that track record of consistency allows people to be more open and honest in their communication.
I think that's great advice, Steve. And I also wanted to ask you, with so many things on your plate, because you've got all these businesses on the go, you have, you're very active in the community. So I have to assume that you've mastered a few productivity tips. Are there any that you would care to share?
Well, I wish I had the secrets there. I'm still trying to learn. I just recently, maybe about a year ago during COVID, I found that I didn't have infinite energy and I had to look for productivity tips. Some of the basic things, just making your schedule, building in flexibility. I had to start scheduling in my calendar thinking time. And at the moment, it was very out there for me to do that. But I started to get more consistent with it. And I was able to kind of take my brain from that in the moment, here's the decisions, to more a holistic, strategic mindset, which, as leaders, we all have to have that time. So scheduling that time. Also finding people that can support you at what you're not good at. I'm a big fan of leaning into people's strengths. And me personally, what I'm not great at, I can just let go. I don't have to be great at all things. And I just find people on my team that, can fulfill those needs of the company, and then trust them to do their job. And that has been, increased my capacity and therefore my productivity.
Yeah, delegation.
It's hard. It's really
hard. It is hard, especially because I think a lot of leaders, they look at something, I could probably do this better, or I could, potentially do it faster. But that could be true the first time, but if you invest in training someone on your team to do it, then you don't have to do it the next 45 times. So there's a productivity benefit.
Indeed. And then that diversity of mindset too, right? That's when some of those good ideas, they will creep in, and all of a sudden your company becomes better for it.
Absolutely. They might have a way better idea as to how to do it than you ever had. So
Oftentimes in my case.
Often.
Yeah.
Right with you. So what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, here at Skils'kin, we're just getting really excited about diversifying, what we do. We're a big federal contractor that's in the food service, grounds maintenance, and janitorial on Air Force bases. That's a core function of our business. We have Skils'Pay that we just truly believe in that can, help change the world. We're engaging at the high school level right now, but we're even talking about maybe it's middle school to talk about what employment means, what a diverse workforce means, just exposing people to different ideas. And we're gonna build a laundry facility. It's
exciting.
Yes, we love the kind of work. It's helping people have a lot of different types of job skills, everything from like manually just putting things through giant irons to like inventory control and delivery. And there's a lot of different things that happen, and maintenance that happen in this laundry world that we're just excited to keep expanding that part of our business and just training people in different things that we just haven't done in the past. So, and
that's exciting.
Yeah,
well,
I'm just gonna
when it's ready.
deal. Yeah, and I just, for myself personally, I'm just gonna keep finding areas that I can help, better my community. Like if there's a spot that I can fill, if there's a skill that I possess that can help, move the needle, then I'm just gonna keep finding my way in, and while still protecting, the me time. So I'm excited about that.
That's wonderful. And on that note, if people would like to follow up with you, where can they reach you online?
Well, again, I'm Steve McBride. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Skils'kin. You can find me on, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can find me on our webpage at Skils'kin. And yeah, I am open for conversations. Just reach out and say hi.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Steve. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Diane, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.